Serviceable ignition systems are important in everyday life, but where technological applications are concerned, they are particularly important. To tell you what a fully serviceable ignition system is worth. However, in spite of their awareness of this fact, there are occasional times when the systems fail and they are not in a position to repair them. It is these people we want to inform. To begin with, we will discuss some theory so that you will have a better understanding of the system. This is the ignition system of the Wartburg 353. The circuit is closed by the steering column lock. In the primary circuit flows a weak current. The primary circuit is produced by ignition coil and contact breaker. A current flows from the number 15 terminal through the ignition coil and from there via the number 1 terminal to the contact breaker. The contact breaker then breaks and interrupts the primary circuit. An ignitable secondary voltage of 12 to 20,000 volts is then produced in the ignition coil. This travels from terminal 4 of the ignition coil to the electrodes of the spark plugs. The diagram shows that it is comparatively easy to locate the possible source of the fault provided one proceeds systematically. We shall now demonstrate this. Let's begin at the electrodes of the spark plugs. When the plugs are earthed, it is not at all difficult to check whether they are faulty or not. We discover the middle plug does not spark, and we check the electrode gap with a gauge at 0.6 millimeters and adjust. If this test proves negative, again a new plug has to be inserted. If that does not cure it, then the fault must be in the circuit of the cylinder in question, beginning with the spark plug socket. Interchanging the sockets proves this cannot be the source either. This means we must check the ignition cables for cracks and moisture. As a tip, you can also check this way. We turn to the ignition coils and first look at the connections. Damp connections can often be the cause of a fault. There is no strong heating at the coil, and this is often the case should it be faulty. Interchanging the ignition coils proved their normal functioning, so we have to tackle the ignition distributor. For this purpose, we have to remove the license plate and the middle part of the front bumper. Each cylinder has working for it one contact breaker on the base plate of the distributor. The firing order is 1, 3, 2. In order to measure the contact breaker gap, the top dead center of the first cylinder must first be found. The number 1 cylinder is next to the radiator. A screwdriver is vertically inserted on the top of the cylinder and the engine is slowly cranked with a fan belt. When the screwdriver is just beginning to move in a down position, the top dead center has been found. T corresponds to this position and Z stands for ignition moment. Now we have found the marking on the first cylinder. The fault, however, must be found in the circuit of the second cylinder. According to the firing order, the next marking is that of the third cylinder. So by slowly cranking on, we align the following marking with T. The contact breaker gap is too small. So in order to adjust it, we loosen screw D, and the distance 0.4 millimeters is set with the eccentric screw E1. To check the ignition moment, the engine is cranked in opposite directions until the marking of the torsional damper is in alignment with Z. By slight turning movements, the contact breaker of the second cylinder is then set in such a way that it just begins to brake. Here the ignition is premature. Now the fastening screws C1 and C2 must be loosened by means of the eccentric screw E2. The adjustment has to be performed in such a way that with the alignment of the markings, the contact breaker is just beginning to brake. The screws C1 and C2 are again tightened, and the setting is checked by slight movement. A test will prove that there now is a spark at the plug of the second cylinder. Replacing the middle part of the bumper, you should not forget to check the light connections are correctly reinstalled. The car is now running again, and it gives any driver a great feeling of satisfaction and safety if he knows how to do something himself. It is of course advisable to take the car to a recommended Wartburg dealer for inspection, particularly if you have adjusted the contact breaker yourself. Experts and the necessary equipment are available here to give the engine the optimum performance at the most economic fuel consumption with expertly adjusted ignition. The service does not limit itself to a mere removal of faults, but naturally includes the exact localization of sources responsible for the ignition failure. In our case, the mechanic will see from the burnt contacts that the fault may be due to the capacitor. The contacts are exchanged, and in doing this the mechanic finds that the capacitor is loose. The following operations are those necessary when you are setting the ignition. Firstly, the cleaning of contacts. Secondly, finding our top dead center. Thirdly, the setting of the contact breaker gap. Fourthly, the setting of the ignition moment. When the bulb goes out, you know that this is the point at which the contact breaker has just begun to part. The proper setting corresponds with the ignition moment 22 degrees, respectively 3.58 millimeters before top dead center. Setting and oiling of the grease felts complete the operations to be performed at the base plate. It goes without saying also that the spark plugs are checked for normal functioning. Spark plugs like these are removed. It is important to check the ignition moment when the engine is running because this confirms the accuracy of the setting. All car owners are aware of the benefits of a serviceable ignition system. If, however, there are occasional failures, many of them do not know how to act. At least, you won't be one of them anymore.